Hey everyone, it's Warren Hayes once again with an AEW Dynamite review. Today is November 3rd, 2022. We're going to be reviewing the November 2nd, 2022 edition of AEW Dynamite. And holy shit, am I right though? Oh, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to unpack, a lot to sort of sift through on this one. But thank you for being here. Listen, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, consider subscribing to the Mr. Warren Hayes Show channel. That way you won't miss a thing. Like the video as well. That stuff helps out a great deal, helps grow the channel, helps, get more people listening to these reviews about All Elite Wrestling's flagship program. So, hey, if you can do that, that would be awesome. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast application, on your podcast feed, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, give it a 5-star review. If you're listening to this on Spotify, give it a 5-star rating. All little things, little simple things you can do, but help out a great deal. You can also become a member of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show channel. On top of that, you can get membership stuff and access to members-only streams and stuff like that. But I'll let you check that out. I don't want to spend too much time on this because holy guacamole, as the kids in the 80s used to say, what a bonkers episode of Dynamite we got this week. I mean, there's things I liked and there's things I didn't like. The show in and about itself to me, though, felt like a fever dream. I think that's really the best way to go about it. And I'm going through Twitter. I'm going through my usual haunts, going to see what people thought about it, the instant reactions and all that stuff. To call this episode divisive would be an undersell, right? It'd be an undersell as to what happened. And I think there was just like you guys and gals and non-binary pals, you probably watched the episode, right? Maybe not. Maybe you're just tuning in to see what I think, and then you're like, hey, I'll listen to what Warren thinks about it, and then I'll go watch it. Because you could be watching this on ×2 speed and whatever. But this was just too insane of an episode of Dynamite to be considered the worst. I think this was just too nuts. Just too much stuff happening, too many jaw-dropping, holy fuck moments to just sit back and be like, hey, you know what? All of this is bullshit. Because I remember really bad Dynamites, particularly one in April 2020. Yeah, I don't remember the date off at the top of my head, but I do remember it was in April 2020, it was the one that was headlined by Jon Moxley versus Jake Hager in a no DQ, no holds bar, whatever they want to call it. You remember that? That stunk. That whole episode. Like, the main event was terrible, but the whole episode stunk. There's been bad ones. Can you, there's so much stuff that was happening on this show. And so little focus on good wrestling, which is completely the opposite of what a Dynamite is, typically. It's just like so much stuff packed. It's like, look, it's the opposite of Raw. Okay? Where Raw is a 2-hour show stretched out to 3. Here we had a 3.5-hour show smushed into a 2-hour time period. And I don't mean that necessarily in a good way. Not in the way where you'd say, hey, you know what, this was such an easy watch. There was 3 hours of content, but it felt like a 2-hour watch. No. Look, the stuff that was happening was just wild. Just so wild. But the focus as to why I watch Dynamite, and I'm assuming probably what many of you watch, the reason why you watch Dynamite is for good pro wrestling on a weekly basis on national cable television, just wasn't there. I can understand why people hated this episode. Like, I should hate this episode. You know what I mean? Like, I myself should be on the front line saying, this episode sucked because everything that I like about Dynamite was sort of shrugged aside. There was a lot of sports entertainment and the matches were very there, a little confusing at times, and the wrestling was passable at others. But here's the thing. The AEW reminded me last night at how fucking wild wrestling can be. Just like bonkers, balls to the wall, insane. It's reminded me how just how it can be sometimes. We've been so conditioned, and again, like I know I'm a broken record on this, but we've been so conditioned to accept wrestling in such an overproduced, clean, sanitized format that when things start getting a little weird, a little hectic, a little fever dreamish, then we go, whoa, this shit sucks. You know? And I think this is years of conditioning that has led us to this, because wrestling in and about itself isn't supposed to be this pristine, proper thing. It's fucking pro wrestling. It is the business of people pretending, trying to convince us that what they're doing is real. It's a business of lying and carnies. And of course we've evolved since then. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't want to get back to the point where, everyone is walking around with shivs because everyone is, too paranoid to walk around alone because they think, they're going to get stabbed backstage, or, people coming to arenas with guns in their pockets. Like, that's a bygone era, and I don't want to get back to that. But what I'm saying is, wrestling, for all its qualities, for all the reasons that we like it, North American wrestling, it's always been kind of trashy. It's always been kind of, it's always had that aspect of it that doesn't make it high art, high entertainment. So when things start feeling messy, we start to go, oh, this isn't bad, this isn't great, but it is, but it isn't. I'll tell you, if this happened every week, this would be a disaster. We'd be heading towards a wall. Okay? This happens 1 week, I can kick back and I'm like, okay, well, in the grand scheme of things, who cares? This was still a noteworthy Dynamite, despite the fact that it's all over the place. And maybe at some points not really good. But wrestling's fucking wild. We need to be reminded of that. It's a weird, wild business, and we were reminded because Jeff Jarrett showed up from the get-go attacking Darby Allin. And I think this is the lead, right? This is the lead to anyone worth their salt reviewing Dynamites, doing punditry. If you're leading, and trust me, there are things on this show, I will get to them. And if you know me at all, you know what's the major news for me on this show. But I think the lead here, anyone worth their salt talking about this show, has to start by talking about Jeff Jarrett showing up and attacking Darby Allin out of nowhere in his final the last outlaw getup, right? He comes in, he attacks him, guitars the shit out of Darby, and he's bleeding. But the point is, like, regardless of what happened, he is now a part of All Elite Wrestling, and not just AEW Wrestling. Not just AEW Wrestling as a performer. Oh, no. Tony Khan tweets out last night, giving old Double J the graphic, tweets this out. Welcome to AEW Dynamite, to the new AEW Director of Business Development, Jeff Jarrett. I look forward to expanding, the AEW live events calendar in 2023 and future years with Double J. and of course, Rafael Morphy, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, and Chris Harrington, and our entire great AEW team. So not only is Jeff Jarrett in AEW and he's swinging guitars and he's coming up and he has his TNA music, all of it, not just that, but he's got an office position. He's sitting pretty in AEW towers. That doesn't exist. Now, listen, Jarrett's promo that he cut, about his family being in the wrestling business for over 75 years, and wherever the Jarretts went, they left an impact. Like, he's not kidding, okay? And I'm not going to sit here and retrace the history of the Jarretts or Jeff Jarrett. So, we'll go with Cliff Notes, because I don't want anyone to feel excluded. There's like, I don't understand, but he's not wrong is what I'm trying to say here. The point here is that the Jarretts in pro wrestling, his father, Jerry, and his mother, they were, they're wrestling royalty, really. When that one dude says there's more than one royal family, we're not just talking about the McMahons and the Rhodeses. The Jarretts are absolutely in there as well. Jerry Jarrett, his father, ran Memphis. Basically took it away from I forget his name. I'm drawing a blank here. Apologies. But he ran the Memphis territory from the mid 70s to the late 80s, and even kept going a while after that with the USWA. Jerry was all around the business, right? And he was poised to take over the WWF from Vince McMahon should the steroid trial go sideways for Vince. Of course, after that, Jerry founded with Jeff TNA, Total Nonstop Action, as an NWA territory. And Jeff continued. He took over from his dad, and Jeff wrestled everywhere. WCW, WWF, TNA Impact, AAA, GCW. Like, just an astounding record. And of course, we'll all remember Jeff Jarrett founding, his own company as well, Global Force. But that's a podcast in and about itself. And of course, he had his own pyramid scheme with Global Force Gold. Again, we're not going to get into that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that Jeff Jarrett has been in this business for such a long time and has worked for everyone and has worked with practically everyone as well. No one lasts in this business if they're not business oriented, and that's what Double J is. He is. Look, this is a guy who, out of nowhere, out of left field, was a vice president of the biggest wrestling company in the world. Just a few months ago, he gets dumped. Where does he end up? Then he goes to AEW. This is the joke. AEW, as far as Jeff Jarrett goes, Jeff Jarrett always wins. And I think it's more than a meme at this point, but this is a testament of his business savvy, of remaining relevant, connected to the business. This is a guy who stood up to Vince McMahon because for money. Who stood up Vince for money. Because it was good business for him he felt was good business for him to do so. I'm not going to sit here and, say Jeff Jarrett, impeccable businessman from top to bottom. No. Again, we're not breaking things down. But just the fact that WWE brought him in to be a VP for whatever short time it was, for whatever minuscule amount of time it was, that's still testament of something that he has to bring. Now, you could argue, you could say Vince brought Jeff in because Vince, from all accounts, still likes Jerry, still Jerry Jarrett, stuck through the WWF, and while Jerry didn't want to have anything to do with it during the steroid trial, but so maybe Vince still felt a little, still feels indebted in a way, and was like, look, I'm going to reach out here, and yes, I'll give Jeff a job. Everything changes in wrestling. I'm just spitballing here. You could argue that for Jeff getting that position, but you can't argue that for Jeff getting the similar position in AEW. Jarrett is still someone who's connected. Because as I said, he is still relevant in the business. He's always maintained a presence in the business. The guy still has contacts. He still has connections. You know what? He's well liked. He's well liked in the business as well. Especially when it comes to promoters, people in power. They like Jeff Jarrett. His legacy is a complicated one. Again, I can see the benefits, just like I saw the benefits of, it's still funny to think about it. Jeff Jarrett, a vice president in WWE, it's still funny. Now he's a vice president, a director, excuse me. He's an executive for AEW. Like, it's still funny to think about it that way. But when you take a minute to just strip it down, like outside of all the nonsense, outside of the, him overbooking himself in TNA as an Austin-like figure, his relationships with Vince Russo and so on and so forth. How is all of this going to, like, if you break all of that away and you just stick to the business aspect of it, you're like, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who is able to work the room and work the business as well as he does. Still today, he's of a dying breed of, like, I don't want to necessarily say carny, but he's a dying breed of, grift from the business, from the old days. A guy who's always found himself in positions where he can make money, where he can be in authority, where he can be in power. This is what Jeff Jarrett is. That's his legacy, for good or ill. Anyone who's sitting in front of their microphones today, whether it's a D-list podcast like my own or an A-plus podcast telling you unequivocally whether Jeff Jarrett is going to be good for AEW or not, has no idea what they're talking about. No one can prognosticate moving forward. All you can assume that if he was brought in to publicly traded company WWE, then he has substantial value to a live events division. Because he's, like I said, connections, contacts, being well liked, these things matter. He has relationships still in the live event business. They still exist. They're still there. So what can he bring to the table? We're going to find out on that level, on a business level. No one can tell you with assurance it's going to suck, it's going to be great. This is going to be on him. And if anything, if he has success here in AEW, this is going to do great in maybe erasing some of the entrepreneurial mistakes he's made in the past. He's not going to be in charge of creative. If Jeff Jarrett was in charge of creative, we have more than enough examples where we'd all be sitting here biting our fingernails and going, oh shit. Oops. This is new territory. I'm sincerely excited to see how this goes. And it could be him finessing himself into a position here, which wouldn't surprise me, wouldn't surprise anyone really who's followed his career, who knows how the guy operates. We're just going to have to, this is literally a wait and see type of situation. Anyone who unequivocally says he's going to be bad for AEW, and just like anyone who's saying he's going to be bad for WWE or good, can't say. You really, really can't say. Not on this level. Look, this is a guy, he's dealt with networks in the past. He stayed relevant in the product. He's followed the product. Look, he worked with GCW. He understands. He's worked with indies. He's worked in Mexico. Jeff Jarrett has barely taken a year off, like with no wrestling. I think there's like just a couple of years, 2 or 3 years in his career since he started where he was like, no, I'm not. This is a guy who lives, breathes pro wrestling. And for good or ill, right? For the good parts and the bad parts, if you know what I'm talking about. But this is a guy, like, there's, objectively speaking, more good to siphon out of a Jeff Jarrett, I think. It's very different than bringing a Conan aboard or bringing, who you might argue has the same type of relevant experiences, but Conan's another beast. Now, what can he bring in the ring? Look, he wrestled twice this year. He wrestled Effie. By the way, he still owes Effie his rematch. He wrestled Effie at GCW the World, and he wrestled the Ric Flair retirement match. I thought he worked. He was a perfectly fine work with Effie. I thought. Effie's matches are, they're not work rate phenomena, right? You don't watch Effie for the work rate. You watch Effie for the character, for the spectacle of it, the showmanship of Effie. And Jeff, I think, fit quite well into that circle there, and he worked quite well. If you watch the Ric Flair match like I did, Jeff Jarrett was a revelation in the match where it was like, holy shit, he is really working hard in this match. So what kind of spot do you want him to have on TV? As a talent, I would say, mouthpiece, but dial it back. Because, Jeff he's a good talker. He knows how to captivate an audience. He knows how to cut a promo. But in a land of A+ promos, which is AEW, Jeff might not be up to par. As far as his work goes, I think he's a perfectly serviceable. I think he's fine. More than perfectly serviceable. Excuse me. Let me backtrack that. He is an absolutely good, solid professional wrestler. And that has always been Jeff's MO. Like, you don't go back to watch Jeff Jarrett's body of work for the exceptional matches he's had. He's always had solid, competent, well-worked matches. He's a solid pro wrestler. And that's that. And, advanced stage and on, but he's still in tremendous shape. It sort of reignites the debate a little bit on whether there's too much talent in AEW. Should we be focusing on that so much, so on and so forth? I think it's a conversation maybe for the MrWarrenHayes show as opposed to a review here. But off the top of my head, if they bring him back and he has a couple of matches, maybe acts more of a figurehead for the group that he's aligning with, the Satnam Singh, Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt group. I mean, that's a choice. The connections are there, but it's okay. It doesn't blow my mind. I don't think he necessarily brings anything special to the group outside of a veteran presence, because Sanjay is a dynamo on the mic. Jay Lethal's a very good promo as well. Like, I don't know what he brings to the table. Now, I think as it stands, it's fair to assume that we're going to have Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett versus Darby and Sting at Full Gear. I think that is clearly what we're going for. I'm excited for Jeff Jarrett to swing the guitar at Sting's head and Sting no-selling it. I think that is going to get one of the largest reactions of the night. And I think from that point on, you could dial back his online, his presence, his on television, not his online presence. He can do whatever he wants online, but his on TV, I think from that point on, you can dial it down a little bit. I'm going to be fair here. I'm going to admit that it injects a little more interest in this Jay Lethal Darby stuff, which I think everything that they've done with Jay Lethal so far has dragged. Well, maybe not so far, but since the Samoa Joe stuff and the Darby stuff, everything has dragged. I don't think it's been interesting. This culminating to a match where we have two legends who have deep history with each other on top of that, going at each other in a tag team match where the young guys can do a lot of the heavy lifting and then the older dudes come in for the big spots and the big pops. I think that's entertainment. It's entertainment in a bottle. It'll be a good moment. It'll be fun. I much prefer Jeff Jarrett getting that out of his system before he's, in his 80s and trying to do it again. I don't know. I don't know what he has to bring that much as a talent for long term. Clearly he's got his business position in the company. He's got an office job. Good for him. I think that's perfect. But yeah, well, let's have this conversation once we're done with Full Gear. How about that? Then we'll see how this goes, because it'd just be a shame if Jeff Jarrett continues to be a focus of storylines in the mid card or whatnot, and Ricky Starks still isn't showing up on Dynamite. I'll just leave it at that. And one last thing before we actually get into the review, because this I think there was an announcement made on Dynamite that I feel is falling to the wayside. No one is talking about, because everyone is much more inclined to be going around talking about Jeff Jarrett and how much he stinks and who is this Shibata guy. Like, of course, always missing the point and discussing nonsense. There was a significant announcement last night that AEW is going to be running the Rupp Arena in Kentucky next year, right? This is one of the biggest venues in the US. There's like 23,500 is the capacity of the place. I just looked at my note. 23, so that's the capacity of the arena. Right now, AEW is struggling to sell tickets. They're doing 2,000 to 3,000 tickets, paid it, distribute it, which, it ain't great. It's nothing mind-blowing here, but clearly they have a destination here to fill up the Rupp Arena, because if they can go to Kentucky to the Rupp Arena, I mean, like, yeah, but we've got 5,000 people and the place is going to look empty. So, I find this interesting that we're getting this coinciding with the announcement of Jeff Jarrett's office job to revitalize the business development. The live business, anyway, is suffering right now. So this is going to be very, very, very interesting to see how things keep going moving forward. Now, when our ticket sales going to improve now that all of this bullshit with CM Punk and the Elite, now it's all being the results are all clear as day now. The Elite are going to come back. Kenny Omega, the Bucks, is that going to spur on more sales? Is that going to reignite the desire to go see Dynamite live? We'll see. Right now, I mean, there's no denying right now, ratings are doing well, doing good, but there's no denying right now that the live side, the live business is tanking a little bit. So I found it very, very curious that they're going to be running one of the biggest sporting venues in the country, in the United States. Very interesting Very interesting. Very interested to see how this goes. And look, maybe this is how we'll see the Jeff Jarrett factor here, right? Maybe this is how we'll see how he will have an impact on the live business moving forward. Just have to stick around and find out. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. AEW Dynamite from Baltimore, Maryland, the Chesapeake Arena. Again, the November 2nd edition. We talked about the post-match a little bit, but not about the match. Jay Lethal defeated Darby Allin. This was all right. You know, a rather short match with Jay taking on most of the offense, setting up Darby's big comeback spot. This was well worked overall. Of course, the spot of the match was Jay Lethal going to the floor and hiding behind the wall that is Satnam Singh. And Darby's like, okay, bet. And Darby goes and he dives onto Satnam Singh. And he just literally bounces off Singh, which was, it is an impressive visual. Now, this is the thing, right? Where people are always like, I can't buy Darby. He's too small and he gets all this offense on the bigger guys. Look, Satnam Singh didn't fucking move. He didn't even break a sweat. He didn't sell. He completely no-sold one of Darby's insane suicide dives. Darby just like, he ragdolled off of him. So, you know, the people who keep complaining about Darby's size and how he, you know, in comparison to the other dudes on the roster, they calm the fuck down. Darby is never pushed above his weight. He didn't take down Satnam Singh in one fell swoop here. He didn't even dent him. We get a guy in a Sting suit attacking Darby Allin. Tony Schiavone, God bless him, said, is that Sting? Like, Tony, after all these years, calling Sting matches and calling, you know, and getting suckered into people in Sting costumes and so on, how has he not figured out at this point how to recognize Sting? Tony, come on. Of course it was not Sting. Anyway, Lethal Injection gets the win. We've been over the look, post-match, right? The Sting guy gets revealed to be Cole Carter in the most womp womp reveal of all time. But then, of course, that led to the true big reveal of Jeff Jarrett. Anyway, we've talked about the Jeff Jarrett. Let's keep moving forward. After all of this, we get a Mox promo hyping up his match later. We get a video of the Elite next winning the Trios title, and then we see a video of a video editor timeline, basically a video project, right? Opened up, and they're replacing their win with the Death Triangle win of the Trios titles. The erasure of the Elite continues. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, they should add QR codes! Get people engaged! Let's go down the rabbit hole of Elite moments we can erase from AEW. AEW World Title Eliminator match. Jon Moxley defeated Lee Moriarty. This personally was my match of the night, which isn't saying much, but I enjoyed this match. Lee picks Mox apart, works the arm. Mox tries to use strength against Lee, but he ends up counteracting a lot of Lee's stuff with technical moves of his own, which is cool because it's not something you see all that much from Mox unless he's put into that position where he's like, okay, you want to ground, you want a ground game, you want to grapple, let's go. LFG. But we're used to seeing Mox like bleeding, kicking the shit out of people. So this was good, you know, working with Lee to Lee's strengths. Lee ties him up, suplexes him into a bridge, King Kong lariat by Mox. They go to war. They have a great sequence of chain wrestling, which is, like I said, not something you see very well all that often, but this was very good. Back suplex by Lee. Mox pops back up. German suplex by Mox. Lee pops back up. We get some fighting spirit in this as well. Lee rolls out of a Juji Katami into a Border City stretch, but Mox pushes through and does the hammer and anvil elbows. The Juji Katami again for the win. After the match, All Ego, Ethan Page comes after Mox. And it's like I told y'all last week. You got to start listening to Warren Hayes. The inclusion of the Firm in the build to Full Gear will give Mox stuff to do, and likely MJF, who, by the way, was conspicuously absent. It did not fall it did not fall to the wayside on my part. I noticed he wasn't around. But it's like I told you, the inclusion of the Firm here is going to give Mox stuff to do right up until Full Gear, intertwined into the story with MJF, because the Firm is intertwined with MJF. So it might even give MJF stuff to do, as opposed to both guys cutting promos off of each other week after week. This is much more interesting. This is much more pro wrestling. It all connects. It all makes sense. Ethan Page attacked Mox. He was on commentary saying, Mox never pinned me, so on and so forth. We've got ourselves another eliminator. We've got ourselves another eliminator match coming up. This is good stuff. Like a lot of seeds being set nonetheless throughout the chaos. Again, match of the night for your boy Warren here. We get a pre-tape sit-down interview with Renee Paquette and Saraya. This was supposed to be the one where she being Renee, had Saraya and Britt Baker, but Britt decided to no-show. So Saraya just conducts the interview solo, talking about wanting to come back to AEW when the timing was right, i.e. when I was out of my contract and the non-compete was up. And Renee asks her about her in-ring status, and Saraya says, look, I wanted to cover this today, but I have one more doctor I want to consult, and I'm going to tell y'all next week. Don't worry, everyone. She's cleared. She's been cleared. This is all kayfabe, and they're going to announce it in the middle of the ring next week. We're getting Britt and Saraya at Full Gear. Why wouldn't you? This is absolutely going to be a Full Gear match. Don't worry your pretty little heads. We get William Regal interviewed backstage, talking about how MJF still has a long way to go to show that he's a true villain. Now, everyone is focused on the fact that MJF is turning face. I still don't buy into it. I still think it's MJF taking us for suckers. He's done it before. He's playing with our emotions, and I think William Regal here is essentially telling us. Don't buy into it. William Regal is basically telling us straight to our face, MJF is still a heel, and he's going to be a heel when all of this is done, because he still has a lot to show that he's going to be a devil, a demon, whatever, a true villain. He's not done yet. He's not done. When I say he's not done, MJF is trying to play with our emotions and make us think that he's in this deep-rooted conflict. Maybe he is, but I think he's going to resort to trickery to get a win. We'll talk about Full Gear on another time, because I'm not convinced about Maxwell Jacob Friedman winning the world title at Full Gear. I'm not convinced about a bunch of stuff, but what I'm convinced about is how fucking good this angle is. And if you're not picking up on these little details, maybe you need a QR code. The Acclaimed come out to celebrate Billy Gunn's birthday. Now, this, as anything related to the Acclaimed, should not get me interested. Okay? But this is what I meant. This also is part of what I was talking about when I was saying how weird and wild wrestling can get. This was exactly it. It was weird. It was over the top, carried by two extremely charismatic dudes. I don't know what to tell you, but this is the weird of pro wrestling that only can work in a pro wrestling setting where the people are sitting. I'm still flabbergasted at the idea of an entire arena of people chanting, "Scissor me daddy ass." It just blows my mind. And this is where we're at. And the Acclaimed are over like hell for this shit. And again, I can't, even if it's something that I'm not into, that it's not made for me, that is very sports entertaining, the Acclaimed are over like hell, and you cannot but not appreciate that. Anyway, they do the whole thing to have the setup with the table and whatnot. They get scissors from a kid in the crowd to give them to Billy Gunn. They debut scissor foam fingers because of course, milk that shit. Milk it. They give Billy Gunn a trophy. They run down his accomplishments, all of the titles he won, including a reference to the infamous reverse battle royal from TNA. TNA, man, it was on everyone's lips last night. They said they had more planned for the show, for the celebration, but 2 people canceled last minute, and the others were upset that he didn't make the reunion. I like that. There was just a little, it's been what, 2 weeks now? There's been a little distance, and then we bring it up whenever we feel like it. I like that. And they have an adoption certificate because they said, you're a father figure to us. We want you to officially adopt us, and please sign this. And he's excited. But the Guns, like his actual flesh and blood, Colton and Austin, come out. Colton Gunn is so obnoxious now with his look. It's ridiculous. Well, more obnoxious. They arrive to break up the party. W. Morrissey attacks them from behind. They get beat down until FTR run out for the save. Again, adding little seeds, couple of more bumps here, more seeds to the stories. We're keeping them fresh, keeping them going. FTR and the Guns. That's what we were setting up here. And also reminding us, look, FTR, they still want these titles. They still want them, but they were respectful in handing them back. Again, like this segment was one of the top highlights of the show. I'm not going to lie. It was just one of those things that it's in a vortex. It's in a moment in time that with wrestlers getting themselves over to a degree that most would give their left toe for, it just worked. Everything worked. Leads into stories. I don't know what to tell you. It was just insane. An insane moment. Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker cut a promo backstage. They want to fight on Rampage on Friday. That's cool. Then we get the Ring of Honor World Title match between Chris Jericho and his surprise opponent, which turns out to be Colt Cabana. If this isn't the best pettiness booking I have seen in a long, long time, I don't know what it is. Like, this just reeked of chin flips and flip-offs. And it's like, there you go, pal. I chuckled the whole way through on this. I thought this was incredibly funny. This is the kind... When is the last time do you recall, true to form, booking on national television just to prove a point, just to piss someone off, just pure pettiness? I love it. Loved it. This is what I'm here for. If anyone still thinks CM Punk has a chance in hell to make it back to AEW, like, I mean, this needs to slam the coffin on that. We need to end this discussion. I'm sorry, all CM Punk fans who are clasping to hope and are refusing and going to all the reality that's been going around. But this is the nail in the coffin. CM Punk is done with AEW. Now, I don't know who made the call here. I have two theories. It could be Tony Khan just going, you know what? Fuck it. Let's make it. Let's just use this as a testament that this is our backstage is a brand new environment. That this is new. This is fresh. And that, we want to move forward with this. I think that's fair. But I think my second theory is that I think it has something to do with Trent's tweet. Trent Beretta, of course, tweeted out the Colt's entrance. He quote tweeted it and added as a caption, "For the boys." Referencing, in my opinion, the locker room backstage. And I think this might have been something that was requested, something that was asked, something was like maybe some of the people who now have more clout in the company were like, look, TK, let's bring Colt back. Let's have him do a match. We'll see what happens. But this would be good for morale kind of thing. Would show good faith to the locker room that we're really moving forward, that there's a new mindset. I think this is an entirely plausible theory. And it's one that I adhere to. More than TK just going rogue and being like, eat it, Phil Brooks. Like, I have a little more difficulty swallowing that one. But, maybe the locker room coming together, going to the leadership in the locker room. We know who they are at this point. And then the locker room going to TK and saying, look, this is what we should do. It would do a lot of good for backstage morale. Let's do it. Okay. I can buy that. Absolutely buy that. But honestly, does anyone still think that CM Punk was not involved in Colt Cabana's, role in AEW? Do we think at this point that he had absolutely nothing to do with it? I'm talking levels. I'm not talking that he was directly involved or whatever. Does anyone still think that everything that has gone around Colt Cabana, from the rumors that his contract was not going to be renewed to his being sent to Ring of Honor instead after people pushing for him, does anyone still believe that CM Punk had nothing to do with this? Because honestly, I think this is an admission. It is an admission that the principal architect behind Colt Cabana's chaos is gone. And now, look, we're much more open and free. If that was not the intended message, it sure as hell comes across as that. Now, you can absolutely argue that, maybe this was the plan all along. Maybe, because Colt is a champion in Ring of Honor, sure, maybe this was the plan all along. Maybe they just wanted to give Colt a booking. There's a whole bunch of things that you could just boil it down to its simplest form. And, Occam's razor, that's usually the path I like to go down, right? You keep it to its simplest thing, and maybe we're tinfoiling this a little too much. But the action from a purely a public relations standpoint, this gesture does come across as element A is gone. That caused detriment to element B. So now we can use element B again. That's how it feels. That's how it looks like. And anyone who's speculating on that level, I think it's fair game. Because there hasn't been any clear ass confirmation. There never will be either. Don't worry, right? The brawl out situation is the new it's the new Montreal screw job. We're going to be talking about this for years. In 5 years, CM Punk is going to he's going to do a shoot interview with someone, and he's going to drop some details. In 10 years, he's going to publish a book, and he's going to come out with new details. We're going to be talking about this for decades at this point. If you thought you were sick of the Montreal screw job, good for you. You've got a new conspiracy one to wrap your head around right here. It's going to be talked about for a long time. And until there is clarity, which I feel will eventually happen, but down the road, up until then, I think it is completely fair to assume that CM Punk did indeed have something to do with Colt Cabana's position in the company. I think it's fair to assume that, to speculate on that level. The match was all right, by the way, because we do talk about matches. There's an unfortunate moment where Colt almost drops Jericho trying a Chicago skyline, but everyone seemed okay. Like even Dan Garcia ran to protect Jericho, so that didn't look good. But Jericho was back into it. He was doing the springboard dropkick. Everyone was fine. Colt Cabana plays the hits, the splash, goes for the atomic elbow. It's interrupted with an eye poke. And he goes for the Superman pin. Hager breaks it up, and then he moonsaults to the floor as well to take out the Jericho Appreciation Society, but Jericho hits a code breaker for the win. After the match, the Jericho Appreciation Society they get Ian Riccoboni off of the commentary, and they want to beat him up again, and Jericho he grabs his glasses, does goofy shit with them, he breaks them. As someone who wears glasses and who understands the importance of what glasses bring to one's brand and appeal, I was very, very mad at Christopher Jericho. Claudio comes out to make the save. Jericho Appreciation Society get on top of him. Bryan Danielson comes out to make the save. He gets overwhelmed. Yuta comes out. It's a smush. Security comes out, breaks everything apart. Now, I think we're still angling towards a rematch, a Claudio-Chris Jericho rematch. I think that's in the books. Claudio pinned Jericho last week, and Claudio was the first out, went after Jericho. We're still going towards that. Will it be at All Out? Will it be at Final Battle? That's a whole other discussion. But most importantly, and again, you have to be paying attention to pick up on this. Danielson came out to help this time. Second, right after, before Yuta, he came out to help Claudio. Now, this is a seed here because bastard Bryan Danielson is here. He exists. He's with us. We know he's here. Did he come out to really help Claudio and try to get Claudio to sway more to his side and prove that he's a part of the BCC? Or did he just do this to one-up Yuta, who's been like, you're not in? And Danielson next week, if they want to cut a promo or whatever, Danielson can be like, hey, yeah, you know what? I came out before you. Where were you last week, Wheeler? This is a seed. This is a bump that's going to occur next week. Convinced. This was not done. This was not done by mistake. This was by design. We get Death Triangle backstage with Pac talking about Ray Fenix, talking to Ray Fenix and saying, here, use the hammer if you want a real win. But, Ray Fenix doesn't seem very enthralled with that. That leads us into the All-Atlantic three-way match. Orange Cassidy defeated Luchasaurus and Ray Fenix to retain the All-Atlantic title. This was fine, but nothing really special. Look, we got some good moments, fast-paced exchanges between Fenix and Cassidy that were a lot of fun, really highlighted the strengths of both men. Luchasaurus lariats both of them down. There was a spot that I really liked, combination Stun Dog Millionaire super kick by the babyfaces on Luchasaurus, which I thought was pretty cool. They fight up the ramp. Luchasaurus teases throwing Orange Cassidy off the stage, but Jack Perry, Jungle Boy, runs in with a chair, attacks Luchasaurus from behind, and then flying body presses, takes a running leap, flying body presses Luchasaurus off the stage through the tables that were at the bottom of the ramp. Hell of a spot there on an evening that was just full of chaos. Pac arrives, hands a hammer to Rey Fenix, who's back in the ring. He doesn't want it, but he eats an orange punch for the win instead. Now, after the match, Pac is going after OC, and then the distinct music of Katsuyori Shibata starts up, and he appears with the rest of Best Friends and Rocky Romero. Pac takes a powder, and Shibata forgot to mention this. The winner of the match had of this match here, on top of winning the title, had an opportunity to sign a dream match for Rampage this Friday. Shibata gets into the ring, stares down Orange Cassidy, and he's like, yeah, I'd like to sign your contract. Then they sign the contract. We are getting Orange Cassidy versus Katsuyori Shibata on Rampage live this Friday night. And I could not be more excited. Now, I don't want to assume, because again, a lot of the discourse, but mostly from bad faith actors, right? A lot of the discourse out there, like, who's this guy? No one knows who he is. A lot of people know who he is. You know who knows who he is? Pro wrestling fans know who Katsuyori Shibata is. And that's what AEW caters to. AEW caters to pro wrestling fans, like myself, like probably yourself as well. Now, there's nothing wrong with you not knowing who Shibata is, because maybe you're not familiar with Japanese wrestling. And that's okay. There's a difference between going online and saying, well, who the fuck is this guy? This sucks. And looking up who the guy is like, oh, I see. I understand. This guy's a big deal and is a big deal for hardcores. I get it. Like there's a difference in reaction. I don't expect you to know who all these people are. But I absolutely do not expect you, viewers, listeners of the Mr. Warren Hayes show, to go out on Twitter and shit on a wrestler showing up because you don't know who he is, who they are. And look, quick primer. Are we good with, should we give it a shot? Quick primer. Shibata is one of the new Three Musketeers that New Japan was promoting in the 2000s. Who was him, Hiroshi Tanahashi, and Shinsuke Nakamura. They were going to build the future of New Japan around those three guys. Shibata had other plans. He decided to leave New Japan for a while, hit the indies in Japan, did the Inoki Genome stuff, but he came back conserving a very pure and precise striking style. They call him the wrestler for a reason. That's his thing, because it's no nonsense. He comes in to fight. And that's what made him also a fan favorite in Japan, and a fan favorite from anyone in North America who'd been watching New Japan at the time, or anyone who was still working on tapes, getting tapes at the time as well. He's always been a darling, but for good reason. He had a career-ending injury in 2017, and I think this is the big point. This is the sticking point here. He was in a fight with Kazuchika Okada for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, lost, but immediately after the match was rushed to hospital for an emergency procedure. Turns out he had a subdural hematoma because of all the headbutts that he had been delivering throughout his career. That was part of his moveset. And he was told he would never wrestle again. And this is why Shibata in a ring is significant, and why a guy like me, a near 50-year-old man, will push tears whenever I see Katsuyori Shibata in a ring, whenever I hear his music, whenever I see him in gear. The thing here is that this is significant because he's such a transcendent, excellent pro wrestler. The fact that he's wrestling again is significant. He's wrestled, he was told he'd never wrestle again. But since last year, he wrestled a UWF exhibition rules match against Zack Sabre Jr. in October last year. But it was an exhibition match, 5 minutes, and it was a grappling thing. Never considered official, but he wrestled that. He said he'd come back to wrestle, and he did at the Tokyo Dome on January 4th this year at Wrestle Kingdom, fought Ren Narita, and they went. That was a fantastic moment. This is going to be Katsuyori Shibata's third match since being told he will never wrestle again. And he's wrestling Orange Cassidy, which also has storytelling. Because if you go back to Forbidden Door, Shibata came out to have a face-to-face with Orange Cassidy, who put the eyeglass, not the eyeglasses, but the sunglasses on Shibata, and everyone sort of, brushed it off as a goof. But now Shibata comes back, he's got another, he's like, no, I'm not done with Cassidy. I want to fight this dude. We didn't even realize that we had planted a seed at Forbidden Door. And now we're getting the match live, free on TV. And people are going to tell me that all of this doesn't make sense and it's terrible and everything sucks. And this should also serve as some kind of, I think something that we need to sort of consider here is how this is a sign of how tight relations are with New Japan. Why would they risk letting Katsuyori Shibata go off and wrestle anywhere else than in a New Japan ring when he's still at risk? Like, we don't know what we're assuming everything's okay, but we don't know what the details are. We don't know how recovered he is. We really don't. And New Japan is like, yeah, go wrestle Orange Cassidy in an AEW ring. Look, we're going to have to stop with this nonsense of New Japan and AEW. They don't get along. The relationship isn't what it used to be. Forbidden Door's dead, blah, blah, blah. We have to stop this, because if you take this into context, into consideration, you're sending Shibata. They're sending Shibata to wrestle in a ring which is not theirs. Despite what his condition is. I'm convinced he's not 100% good enough to wrestle. They're probably going to be very careful. Just don't headbutt anyone. But you know what I mean? Like, this is a significant event. And then on Wrestling Observer Radio this morning, Dave Meltzer was saying Shibata had been going around saying that he has another name he'd like to wrestle, and that's Bryan Danielson. Well, there you go. We're not done with Shibata and AEW by any stretch of the imagination. You want to add to the insanity of everything that was happening? How about this? Backstage, Tony Schiavone's with Swerve Strickland and fucking Rick Ross, hip hop artist Rick Ross was back there. They talked about making Swerve the biggest man in sports and music, and Keith Lee shows up, and I didn't exactly know what was going around here, because I was enthralled by Ross shouting out accusations over at the top of his lungs. Look, in all seriousness, this continues to highlight Swerve's desire for success at all costs, right? And it's clearly causing a rift between him and Keith Lee. So again, more storytelling moving forward, right? From the promotion that doesn't do stories. And again, just a little nugget here. And listen, if Swerve wants to flex his music industry contacts on TV like that, like he's been doing, which is fine, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I'm much more appreciative that he brings in people who know how to make it work on TV, right? Because Rick Ross commanded that segment, not gonna lie. AEW TBS title match then happened. Jade Cargill defeated Marina Shafir to retain her TBS title, despite the fact that Nyla Rose has it. Look, stuff happened in the ring, okay? But this was all about Nyla being a troll, doing commentary. And if at this point the chaos hadn't gotten to you, I'm convinced that this moment put it over the line for you. This pushed it over. I don't think it was overboard like we've seen in the past with these types of gimmicks where people are doing live commentary on the house mic, right? It walked a fine line, though. I can understand why some people hated it. Some people thought, I love Nyla Rose and her new incarnation where she's been leaning into her her Twitter shitpost personality. I think it works wonders for her, and I am stoked that she's doing it on TV, because she is developing into a legitimate, excellent on-screen personality. And I can't really argue with anyone who thinks the opposite. She's been great, and she's been great for a while, but this focus with the TBS title has been fantastic. And look, if you don't think this whole segment wasn't to smoke and mirror Marina Shafir and Jade Cargill, I don't know what to tell you, because this is what it was for. You got the match, you give a little story bump, you get another win for Jade. Like, you get all of those little story elements out of the way in a match that has no rhyme or reason outside of Marina being in Nyla's close circle and, you know, just being the jabron who eats a loss to the other main protagonist slash antagonist in this story. So, you know, whatever, I mean, I can't even sit here and tell, and everything was so overwhelming at this point. Like with Nyla doing the thing. And again, I don't think Nyla was necessarily going overboard with the stuff. And thank God they limited Vicky Guerrero's mic time here. Nyla looked like $1 million. I think she worked it perfectly. It wasn't overboard, didn't become ridiculously overbearing. But I think that in the context of last night, a lot of people just like, this is too much, man. I can't take this anymore. And I understand. There was a lot of stuff going on last night. Jade chases off Nyla after she defeats Marina Shafir. Then we get a video package for the House of Black. I was told the House of Black were gone from AEW. They were done. I was told that they were finished, kaput. That Aleister Black, Malachi Black, Tommy End was finished with the company, and he was, you know, looking to go back to WWF as fast as possible. I heard that Buddy Murphy was also done, and he was unsatisfied with how he was being used. That they were all looking to head back to the sweet, to drink from the sweet nectar that pours from the large pitcher of creativity that is Triple H Paul Levesque's reservoir of knowledge and wrestling greatness. I hope all those sentences held up cohesively. Yeah, you know, you see this kind of stuff and you're like, so many things are overhyped, overreported, or misunderstood. And then the main event, Ring of Honor World Television title match. Samoa Joe defeated Brian Cage. I enjoyed this, and honestly, this match was all about Brian Cage getting his shit in. Like, he went up to Samoa Joe. It was like, look, Joe, I haven't been on Dynamite for a while. Do you think I can just get my shit in? And Joe's like, yeah, get your shit in. Because, man, Joe was eating it. German suplex. He gets crushed by a Tope con Hilo. And I keep saying this. Whenever I saw Brian Cage... You see Brian Cage do Tope con Hilos on TV. You watch him on the Indies and so on and so forth. You watch him in Impact. You watch him in AEW. He's done this before. And you're like, it's Tope con Hilo. But when you see it live, when you see a man of his size doing that live, it's a whole other experience. Popped right on my seat when I saw that. And he just lands flat on Joe's back. He just crushed him. Joe gets a kick and a senton in, followed by a power slam, but Cage lands a tiger feint kick, the spinning top rope elbow, and a pump handle into a front face slam. What the hell was that? But it was perfect. It was just like, he's getting his shit in. But Joe has him tap out to the Coquina Clutch. I don't think they call it that anymore. I don't think it's the Coquina Clutch anymore. You're supposed to call it. After the match, the Gates of Agony hit the ring. They take out Samoa Joe. Wardlow comes out to save his tag team partner, of course. But Will Hobbs sneaks up behind Wardlow and belly-to-bellies him. And he's holding the TNT title. And Will Hobbs, looking like $1,000 million. Those gold chains, those black jeans, are you kidding me? it's crazy how little you need from that guy to just make him look like a star. Now, this all, I know that this all reignites the, but where's Ricky Starks stuff? But Powerhouse Hobbs is one of these guys that AEW is clearly banking their future on. Why wouldn't you push him? Look, but I agree to an extent as well that Ricky Starks not having more of a prominent position is a bit of a miss. But maybe I think we're going to talk about this on the next podcast. Because right now we are done with the review. And look, like I said, look at the length that this review went. So much stuff to talk about in a admittedly not up to par level of Dynamite, but just so much stuff going on, keeping it fun and wild that you're just like glued to your TV. It's like, what the hell am I watching? But overall, you're like, what am I watching? A lot of things just didn't connect. They didn't snap. It's a strange one. The worst, not by a long shot. The greatest, not by a long shot. But like I said at the beginning of my review, it reminded me just how wild pro wrestling can get. Just absolutely batshit bonkers it can get. Let's not do this every week. Sprinkle this on for a little flavor once in a while. I'm okay with that, but last week I was praising how, tight and, Dynamite the feel of Dynamite had been for weeks now. Where it's like everything felt like a purpose, and then you spin around and you give this like hodgepodge. It's a hell of a show. Too eventful to be thrown to the garbage, to be thrown aside, tossed aside, and be like, this is a shit Dynamite. Too much stuff happened that has significance and impact, whether it's short term, mid, or long term. Very interesting. But hey, I like to think that you guys, gals, and non-binary pals are interesting because you stuck around to the very end of this review, and I appreciate it a great deal. If you haven't already, leave a like here or leave a review or a rating on your favorite podcast app. And hopefully you enjoyed this one again. I will be back next week, of course, next Thursday for another Dynamite review. In the meantime, subscribe to make sure that you catch the Mr. Warren Hayes Show proper, which is recorded on Tuesday nights and then available to be listened to and consumed at your leisure. Thank you again, everyone, for joining me today. Have a great rest of your day or evening, and I'll see you next time.